What's on your mind, right? That's like the classic coaching question.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, the big thing that I've been struggling with lately that I've been trying to figure out how to do better is the amount of time I spend generating the content itself. So let me give you a little context on like how I'm doing it now. I think that'll help.
Okay, great.
So on sirenoaffiliates.com right now, there's a blog post. I'm having blog posts published every other week. And I'm doing a weekly podcast called Partnership, where basically I talk about kind of higher level, broad concepts of like creating partnership programs through your website. So obviously affiliate programs come to mind, but it could be royalty programs. It could be, profit share programs, anything like that. Cause Siren can do all of those things. It's not just affiliate programs.
Nice.
But most of it is pretty much focused around like, how can you find affiliates? How can you support those people? How, stuff like that. So what I've been doing is I actually wrote, for the last few weeks, basically wrote my script. I literally wrote an entire script for like a 15-minute podcast episode, right? And I've done presentations in the past where I just kind of have bullet points and I'm able to simplify it to where I'm just doing the key elements and nothing else. But I found that I was able to record a lot faster and cut back on my editing almost entirely if I just had a pre-written script and I'm using my, my teleprompter and I'm just reading off the prompt and I'm, cutting it up and all that stuff. So there's not a lot of there's not a lot of pauses, there's not a lot of, second takes or any of that stuff. I just have a single recording, I dump it into Descript and I clean it up and I'm, pretty much done with the episode, in a couple hours, including editing and uploading and the whole 9 yards. So that part I feel like I have down and I feel okay with that. The thing that's killing me is the amount of time it takes to just write that actual transcript. Cause you're talking, my episodes are 15 to 20 minutes long and I found that basically translates to about 2,500 words.
Okay.
And there's just a lot of
that's
content.
a long blog post. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's a lot. Yeah. So, and I'm seeing that people, and I don't really want to just do the interview format because I feel like there's a lot of that in the WordPress space specifically.
Yeah.
I figured I'd sprinkle in an occasional one with somebody as like a guest or something like that. But for the most part, it's just kind of me. Here's 15 minutes. Here's some information. Let me just throw down some facts and some, knowledge that I have on this topic. But like I said, what's killing me is the amount of time I'm spending just doing the writing. Now, I have started to alleviate that a little bit by outsourcing the first draft. So I have somebody who's writing the content on my site now, and I actually just outsourced to have them also write. Basically, I just said, just sit down for 2 hours and write as much as you can about whatever the different podcast content is. And my thinking is I'll just go through it and I'm going to edit that draft to be my voice, hoping that maybe it'll cut back on my time a little bit. But yeah, so that's kind of where my mind's at, what I've been working on and what I've been thinking about.
Okay. Yeah. So, this is like a common problem, right? It's how do we balance like not sounding like a total schmuck, right? By just like trying to go off the cuff and saying, and like the ums and the ahs and the not really, versus like fully scripting an episode, right? Especially, I know people who do like fiction or storytelling podcasts, and there's really no way around fully writing, like fully scripting that, right?
Right.
Like, if you're trying to tell a story, like a proper narrative, then you need to script that. Mm-hmm. When we look at podcasts like yours, which are designed to, establish your expertise and kind of build awareness around your product, I think we can have a little bit of a hybrid approach, right? And so, you mentioned that you're doing blog posts every other week, right? Mm-hmm. I was checking the stream, so I might have. Are you repurposing those as episodes?
So I have originally, and that helped a lot with content. Once I chewed through all of my blog content, I started having to figure out what I was going to talk about on the podcast first. And I actually think moving forward with how much stuff is going into these episodes, how much content just has to be written, and the fact that it's kind of a higher level concept thing, I'm starting to think it's actually going to be the opposite. I'm starting to think that the podcast will be the seed and the blog post will kind of spin off of the high level concepts and kind of like do deeper dives. So like maybe the podcast talks about the high level concept of how to support your affiliates. And then there's like 3 or 4 blog posts that talk about tutorials on how Siren can do that.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Especially because it gives you the opportunity for like feedback from potential listeners and other people too. So you can kind of integrate that, right? So I think there's a couple of things that you can do here to, I'm sorry, do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, great. I adjusted my noise gate and I think it's a lot better.
It's good.
Great. So I think there's a couple of things that you can do here, right? First is you're creating content and talking to people, and there's this opportunity for you to turn all of that into podcast content, right? Like this is going out on my podcast feed in a couple of days, if not today, right? Now you don't do coaching, but you have customers, right? You might want to do case studies and talk to some of them. Even if that doesn't get you a 20-minute episode, it gives you like a 10-minute episode, right? Where you kind of talk to them. And then you can turn that little interview into podcast content and then rewrite it as a case study, right? So there's things like that you can do where you're kind of doing like these in-public case study reviews. But as far as the solo episodes go, because you are, and this is going to, you know, I understand that I've been kind of talking on the internet for over 10 years. And like I was in drama club before that. And so like I'm very comfortable kind of performing, right? But this does get easier the more you do it. Is you'll get to a point where you're comfortable with having an outline and kind of talking through some of those things. I think what you can do, and maybe test this out, right? Like maybe try this and see if it works, is do what's called a fat outline, which is basically like you have your bullet points and then you have a couple of paragraphs underneath, and then you can do a little bit of off the cuff work. This is generally what I will do, because I do what I'll write my newsletter on Monday or Sunday, and then I will turn that into a more fleshed out blog post, and in like about a week's time I'll read that verbatim, right? But I'll add stuff in there, right? And so not verbatim, the opposite of verbatim. Right. I'll read it, and then I'll kind of sprinkle in extra context, you know, maybe based on feedback I've gotten from the newsletter or something else that maybe I thought of when I didn't think about writing it. And what I find is that my blog posts are usually around 1,000 words. The newsletters are like 600 words. The blog posts fill out to about 1,000 words. And so with a little ad-libbing, I probably get to like 10 or 15 minutes. And if that's all you need, right? Like if that's all you need to communicate the idea, then I think that's fine, right? So I think the other thing I would kind of challenge is, does it need to be a 20-minute episode, right? If you can, because then like kind of de facto, if you're doing 1,000 words instead of 2,500 words, you've got 2 episodes from that, right?
Yeah, that's true. And actually it's funny you say that, because I've been thinking a little bit about, I was taking a note there, sorry. So, and actually I was talking with somebody and they had alluded to possibly having they do even like really short episodes, and instead of making it a once a week, they chop it up into small pieces and batch them even further. So maybe it's 2 or 3 times a week, but it's like 5 minutes. It's like one good tip, and that's basically it. And I don't know how I feel about that, but they from a strategy standpoint, they were saying that a lot of podcasts, a lot of podcasting platforms rank based on the number of downloads. So that's kind of a tell. So they're kind of like gaming the system a little bit by doing that. But
Yeah, I mean, I would challenge that because I think, because then like I would just chop up my episodes and publish like one every 10 minutes, right?
Right.
So
No kidding.
it's like they're probably averaging the number of episodes versus the downloads. And like that is like Apple Podcasts have said like it's a combination of people who subscribe to the show or follow the show now, downloads and completion, right? So yeah, like if you have a shorter episode, I guess it's more likely that people will complete the episode.
Yeah.
Right? And like that helps. But the truth is, like, if you're just churning out short, mediocre content, it's still mediocre content.
Still mediocre content, exactly.
And my goal for a single, like, I mean, you're familiar with Troy Dean, I assume, right? Right. So like he talks about how like when he was doing courses, I don't know what he's doing now. But when he was doing courses, right, he talked about he would look at the course overall and he would look at how to get his students from 0 to win. And then he would look at each individual module or video and say, how can I get my students from 0 to win in this? And so I really like internalize that. And when I approach a solo podcast episode, especially, where is my listener at the beginning of this episode and what would get them to win by the end? And so like, if it's like, oh man, well, here's all the reasons you should do X, but you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Like that's like kind of shitty, right?
Yeah.
So
right, totally.
I guess I'm gonna have to throw an explicit on this now. But so I think like you can do things to increase your downloads, but if you're not serving your audience, then none of that is going to help.
It's the same song and dance, right?
Yeah.
Don't play the game. Just do good content.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Totally.
I mean, like I'm sure. Well, this is live and it's going to go out, so I won't name names. But I'm sure you and I can both think of companies who do things that are undesirable, right?
No, I can't think of a single one.
No. So as far as let's take a step back. And how comfortable are you with that proposition of instead of fully scripting something, do like I got this idea of a fat outline from one of my podcast guests, Josh Burnoff. He's a writer and a ghostwriter, so it's like he writes business books for people essentially. And he talks about how like the fat outline is crucial for a good book, because then you don't just have a skeleton, you have like a foundation. And again, I like that idea.
Yeah. I mean, so a little context. I've done quite a bit of live stream content, quite a bit of live content, lots of presentations. I've done several, public talks, both in WordCamp and both outside of it too. So I've done, and all of that was based on either a slideshow with bullet points or something like that. So like, I think that really I'm comfortable, I guess, with ad-libbing, right? Because I mean, all of that was basically ad-libbed. I mean, I'm sure it was practiced a couple times, but but really it sounds like what you're saying is instead of doing the practicing where I'm memorizing the fat part of that outline, I'm pre-scripting key pieces and then going off the cuff. And actually, it's already kind of started to happen naturally in a couple of my episodes already. So like I've actually just from, so I'll have like a piece of a script and then I'll just kind of go off the cuff for a second and I'll say something and then I'll rewind and I'll just keep on going. So like I have been starting to kind of do that. The problem is I'm trying to figure out like what's enough and what's too much. Do you know what I mean? Like, because there's a balance there that you're striking where you're trying to figure out, what goes in a fat outline, what doesn't belong there, because otherwise you're just writing the whole transcript again.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think the way, let me see, can I mean, I certainly can share my screen. Is there something I can share on my screen? That would be good. Okay. So let me show you this. Hopefully I can just select a single window. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. And then hide the sidebar. So that, notes and stuff. All right, cool. We'll do this one and then we'll share it. So here's what, man, I got the new iPad Pro. I told myself I wouldn't, but because I'm a sucker, I did. So the next solo episode I'm working on is going to be about my product ladder and like how I've been really thinking about it. And so these are the kind of story beats that I have, right? So for me, it's not even really a fat outline. It's just like thin, dumb sketches. Like, here's the story I want to tell. So I kind of just like, I will kind of freeform write my notes out like this. Mm-hmm. And because it's something I've been thinking about a lot, I'm very comfortable talking about this. Right. So I could have made, I have this. This is where it's not serving me well. I don't know why I have, it's because like, making the product is easy is what I'm going for here, right? Like quote unquote easy, right? I could have made Facebook, right? But like I couldn't have made Facebook, right? Like app wise, I could have built it,
right?
But I didn't. I guess what Jesse Eisenberg says, and if you could have made Facebook, you would have made Facebook,
right?
And then I want to get into like, who do my products really serve? I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place. I need to focus my offerings. And so these are kind of, I'll move these into Obsidian. I love Obsidian. Right?
I'll use it. I'm a power user, dude. I love Obsidian.
Oh, it's so, I avoided it for a long time because I was like, I don't want to build my notes app. And then like I started using it for one thing and I'm like, yep, I'm going to build my, data view by itself is worth, it's just so good.
The canvas is great too. I have Siren's entire, like literally how I've built Siren was all done through Obsidian. Like it was just notes, and I've got this giant like entity relationship diagram for like literally every model in Siren. Like I still use it. I'm using it right now just to keep track of what I've built. It's crazy. Anyway,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's like Canvas is so good too. So this is like one form of an outline. That I will do. Is there another? I usually like delete these after I record. Or like here's one that I used in a recent live stream where it's like, this is the kind of like, and again, like these notes work for you, right? Like maybe you open up a canvas in Obsidian and you just kind of have these ideas and then you have like notes underneath. But for me, like with the topics I know I want to cover, and I've been thinking about a lot, like those story beats are enough for me. And then if it is something I'm trying to flesh out a lot more, that usually turns into about 600 words or so. And then like under each section I'll have, where am I? So I started writing my process for finding podcast guests, and then I got distracted and wasn't really, I had like writer's block. So I just wrote like a note, like mention scouts in baseball and how that's like a full-time job. So usually I'll write like a couple of paragraphs and then like also say this, also mention that. And that's usually enough for me to, it's almost like your slides, right? Like it's almost, that's enough for me to be like, oh yes, I want to talk about this. Yeah. And like the cool thing about, especially doing it in Descript, like they make long pauses. I just said it like not how I normally say it. They make long pauses like really obvious, right? And so you can usually look for those in the transcript if you need to rephrase something, right? I think like a couple of years ago, I would have been like, if you feel like you're editing a lot, like then definitely fully script it. But because today editing is like literally deleting words, I give myself a little bit of leeway because I used to do a one shot as well, right? Or like I would literally like record in Descript and then stop recording and delete the thing and I messed up on and then do it again, right? But like now you can kind of keep it running because they make those long pauses pretty obvious. And so I would try that because there is that that balance between, am I going to spend all of my time writing this episode versus am I going to spend all my time editing this episode?
Right.
And I think like spending your time writing it is really important, but if we can speed that up a little bit, that would be good. The last thing I would want to say here is that I am AI hesitant, but there are actually Mac Whisper just released a dictation feature, which is great. But I use Whisper memos on my phone. And like Cast Magic has an app where you can, but like you might try, this hasn't worked for me. I'll just say that straight up. But like it could work for you. Like creating a really simple outline and then just kind of rambling into an AI for a while and then asking it to clean
Organize
it up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like an iteration.
Right. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with the other writer. So I'm having this person, you know, we pick different subjects. She basically fleshes out. I just said, you know, like I said, like sit down just for 2 hours and just write a draft. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to, I just want a foundation, a starting point. And my thinking is that I'll take that and I'll basically rewrite it in my own language, in my own, you know, and I find that even when I'm writing, I'm actually talking to myself a lot. My wife picks on me all the time. She's like, "You writing a podcast again?" Because I'll be in the room and I'll be talking to myself. Like I'm reading it out loud to be like, does that sound like me? Does that not sound like me?
Does this make sense? Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Right, that too. But there's yeah, so I've been thinking about that, but I'd be interested to see where AI goes with that too, because I could see getting to the point to where some parts of it could potentially, like there might even be another step in the middle where I take this draft and I feed it through an AI system that knows my voice, and then it translates it to my voice a little closer, and then I like do the final editing from there. But it's not there yet. But
yeah, and I mean, like I have found that this is crazy, but I have found that the more I use an AI, the worse it gets. Which is
oh my
very
God.
Strange.
Yes. It is getting dumber, I swear.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It feels like that. 100%.
Yeah. And so like one tool I really like the first few, like took an episode and turned it into like a really good blog post. And then the last one, it was like, "Hey, strap in." And I'm like, "What?"
Right. Let's delve. It's like,
let's delve in.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's delve. Come on. And like, I hate that it always ends every sentence with the benefit in a passive tone after a comma. I know that's weirdly specific, but it does it so often that I can be that specific. Like it'll be like benefiting everybody in the long term. And I'm like, oh, so this is written in AI. Like as soon as I see that.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
So it's not there yet. There's people out there building prompts and stuff to make it do better, but
yeah. But even those, every time I'm like, I've said like to various ones I've tried training, like never use delve. And it still uses delve. And I'll be like, always write in the first person. And it'll be like, instead of join Joe Casabona, it'll be like, join me, Joe Casabona. And I'm like, no, no.
No, just me.
Write
just
it
me.
as if I'm saying it. As if a human being is talking to another human being.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so
aside from the transcripts and the content writing itself, another challenge that I'm running into is coming up with content ideas, actually. So this high level thing, because like there's only I have a few, like, you know, I'm trying to write mostly evergreen content, right? So again, I'll kind of go through my process real quick. So I'm using Mangles for my SEO research, and basically I'm just doing a lot of keyword research throughout the week, and I'll just kind of pick a keyword and I'll say, okay, I'm going to, you know, write about the high level concept related to this. And that's actually working pretty well. I actually just found out that one of my podcast episodes got ranked on Google this week with that.
Nice.
So yeah, super excited about that. So that's working obviously, and it's giving me some ideas and it's giving me content, but it's taking a lot of time to do that research and actually find stuff that translates into an actual good podcast episode. You know what I mean? Not just,
yeah.
So I've been trying to figure out other ways to come up with content ideas aside from just, oh yeah, I should totally talk about this or that, or, I guess, so that's one way I'm coming up with content. Another way I'm coming up with content is kind of around a feature. So obviously I'm doing a lot of product development right now with Siren. So my head is very much in the game of the use cases for this, right? So I'll think of a few pieces of content that works around those use cases. And even right now, the content's coming to me pretty easy because I've got about a dozen more use cases that are coming down the pipeline with my lifter launch that's happening this month, because I'm doing a whole bunch of new features for the plugin and all this stuff that's just adding like royalty programs and a whole bunch of stuff that's just like giving me just fresh perspectives, and it's making writing content really easy right now. 2 weeks ago, that wasn't the case, right? 2 weeks ago, I had launched Siren about, a month and a half ago, and all of those feature-driven things, those product-driven concepts, I'd kind of already talked about at least somewhere in the podcast. So I've been trying to figure out how I can, like, if you look at my site right now and you go to Siren, if you go to Siren's site and you go to the podcast section, you'll see the episodes there. So like one of them is like how to find, affiliates for your program. One of them is like, what is a cookie window, right? And how can you use it? So they're very evergreen. They're very broad, topics, but I'm kind of chewing through these affiliate program concepts pretty fast. Right. So like I'm trying to figure out how I can continue to run this podcast, continue to add good quality evergreen content that that isn't just literally a copy paste of an episode that I've already done.
Yeah. I get that. And I've seen that happen, right? Like one of my favorite podcasts was Landing Page School.
Mm-hmm.
And you could tell, like, after a while, he just started, like, recycling concepts and things like that.
Yeah.
And, like, you know what? Like, if there's, like, a short run... If there's a podcast where it's, like, short run, and it's, there's, like, a very obvious end to it, then, like, that's something else to think about.
Let it end.
What's that?
Just let it end.
Yeah, just let it end, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, early days, that's not the case, right? And so I think like there's, oh, hey, I have this highlighted already. Yeah, I've started using Omnivore for my highlighting, and I'm trying to find. Justin Welsh had an article recently. About places to find content ideas. And I really wish he gave like four really good places. Well, there's one really good place that I wish I could remember. So if I can't find it now, I will follow up with you.
Okay, cool.
Because it was just like a couple of really good ideas. But I think as you consider like how to come up with content, first of all, like restating older episodes in a different way or from a different perspective is also okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or if something changes, right? Like an episode you put out today like feels evergreen, right? But if something changes later and it's like, oh, Chrome went ahead and killed like the thing that everyone's worried about, right?
Yeah.
You could talk about that. So I like as time goes on, you will, I think, find good ideas to talk about. But two of the things that I'm remembering, Socrates, that's the website. I'm gonna.
Itch you had to scratch.
Yeah, there's a website called Socrates. I think it's called Socrates that like you can basically find questions that people are asking.
Oh,
right, which like makes sense because all Socrates ever did was ask questions.
Right.
So I think that's it. I'll follow up on that though.
Cool.
And then the other thing is like see what competitors are writing, right? So you could see like what impact Radius or whatever is blogging about if they're blogging.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I actually have a pretty cool automation set up with Zapier right now that all of my competitors' RSS feeds, it just types it in and it organizes them. And then it sends me an email with a link to the original post. And then AI just reads the post and then gives me other suggestions on other content that could be written related to it.
Nice.
So I kind of have some of that too, and that's helped a little bit, but I shouldn't have interrupted you. I please keep going. You were on a roll.
No, oh yeah. And then, I think the thing that has done pretty well for me is leveraging social media and just being like, hey, what questions do you have about XYZ, right? And I'll ask everywhere. I'll ask my mailing list. If you're getting support questions, like those are generally good things to cover, right? Because like then you could put that in the knowledge base as well. And then like I said, like case studies or even like people who are using competitors to be like, hey, what do you like? What are your biggest pain points with your, and this is not from a switch to me, I'll solve it, but it's like
Right.
if you publish that interview, you're learning something, and then other people are like, oh, I have that problem too, how do I solve it? And then you could talk about how to solve it, right? So I think there's like a wealth of ideas out there, and then it's also worth noting that it might feel like you are saying the same things over and over again, but we need to remember that our audience isn't hearing it as often as we're saying it.
Yeah, that's true.
I really thought that, like, I think I said this in a recent newsletter, actually. I thought the idea of don't use episode numbers in your titles was like settled science. And within a 2-week span before my vacation, 2 or 3 people asked about that. And I'm like, oh, so it's not settled. Like, I thought I said it to death, and like other people did, but it's still
a discussion.
Yeah. New people are starting podcasts. New people are like people who have been podcasting are rethinking because the landscape has changed. And I suspect it's the same for affiliates, right? Like new people are launching businesses every day, and maybe they try. I've tried affiliate programs before, but I was never good at it. So like, I'm considering bringing it back. And so there's always, I think that if you talk to your customers and you kind of scour, like Reddit is probably a good place to find questions, right?
For sure.
As well.
And I guess, okay, so that makes a lot of sense. Getting some feedback. And I've kind of been doing that, and it's been helping a little bit. But I'm not getting as much feedback from that as I'd hoped I would. My list, I'm still pretty new, so my email list is still pretty small, a couple hundred. Obviously I have several people following me on X, but most of them, the overwhelming majority of them, are not running an affiliate program, right? And it's just because they're not product owners, or they're not, they're not that person. They're usually developers, ironically. I mean, not ironic at all. That's literally the opposite of that, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't get as much feedback on those kinds of things as I want. And another challenge that I'm having with Siren right now is actually that Siren itself is in many ways novel. And what I'm for this audience, for WordPress specifically, right? The idea of running a royalty program is not new, but the idea of being able to run a royalty program to be able to basically create a clone of Etsy with WooCommerce and Siren is definitely new. That's not something that, other people were doing or really even talking about. So like the tricky part is some of it needs to be content that is that feedback, that is the educational stuff, but some of it is just straight up, dude, check this out. You could do this, right? Like this is a whole business model that you couldn't do with WordPress 6 months ago that you can do now. And so I've been trying to figure out, like, I don't know. I don't even really know 100% what I'm asking here. I'm just kind of talking through this.
And this is really helpful, right? So I've got a couple of ideas for you, right?
Okay.
One is maybe your current. So I would leverage LinkedIn, right? Katie Brinkley has like the 4 pillars of social media. And the first one is like poll your audience. Those get a lot of engagement and visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if you just ask like what affiliate program are you, or what affiliate platform are you using, right? Or have you considered offering an affiliate program? Like you'll probably get some good engagement from that. But you could, there's a couple of other things, right, based on what you just said that I'm thinking. While fewer people might be offering affiliate programs, I suspect lots of people in your audience are part of affiliate programs.
Yeah.
Right? And so
absolutely,
you could put out lots of tips on how to properly leverage affiliate programs and highlight affiliate programs that are good, because you're putting out general education for people. But then, you know, when a business comes to you and they're like, hey, I want to leverage a good affiliate program, you're putting out advice on how to help those people help their affiliates, right? It's kind of like how Carfax advertises to the person buying the car, even though they sell to the car dealership.
Right.
Yeah. Like you can try to appeal to your customers' customers.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then the other thing, right, is based on what you said, maybe affiliate isn't the, like, maybe that's certainly a vertical, but maybe you can look at other positioning, right?
Yeah.
And you could talk to authors who have royalties, right? I just got my first royalty check after like writing books for 12 years, right? Like, and it was very rewarding, right? And so like you can talk about like how to structure a good royalty program, or like, hey, are you co-authoring a course with someone and you want to sell it and like split, right? Like I did that with somebody a few years ago, and like it was just kind of the honor system. Like
right.
I just had to kind of trust that they were paying me
your
half of what we made that month,
right.
And so there are like these kind of like other like like you said, like non-affiliate angles that you could take for it.
And while even as you're talking about that, like, and even as I was talking through this, I do think that I could probably write a lot more content that is literally just a specific type of business model that a program can revolve around. And I've kind of done that a little bit with, there was an episode I did, I think it's called 3 Programs That Will Change Your Business or something like that. But it was just like, I covered 3 different programs, but it kind of ended up mostly revolving around the idea of like how an affiliate program can, not even just affiliate program, specifically how Siren and its capabilities can completely change how a gym membership works, right? So like I went into talking about how, you know, a basic gym membership with an affiliate program can be a thing, but what if on top of that you also had a program that, you know, gave your trainers a commission for like based on how many members there are and how many people they have signed up. And like I just kind of talked about like 3 or 4 different programs that are specifically for gyms. And I think this kind of aligns with what you're talking about reusing content, right? Because in my head, I'm like, oh yeah, you can extrapolate this idea, this approach to like just about any kind of business, right? Because a gym, right, with its individual trainers, it's the same relationship as a multi-course platform with individual educators, right? It's the same as even a podcast network with individual podcasters, right? It's the same idea. Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, okay, well, I've already talked about that program. I don't really need to talk about it again, but it sounds like I probably need to get over that limitation, and I need to start thinking about, okay, so I've talked about how this can apply to gyms. Now let's talk about how it can apply to how it can apply to LMSs, how it can apply to, you know, like I said, the podcast networks. things
and
like that.
There's two key things at play with that line of thinking, right? One is that people can be generally unimaginative, and if you're like, oh, you're talking about gyms, that doesn't apply to me,
right?
But the other thing is that people like to feel like they're being talked to, like directly to, right? And so like this is why it's really important to have a specific niche, right? And why, since I started talking to busy solopreneur parents, a lot more people have filled out my coaching form, right? Because they're like, hey, I'm a busy because I mean, in my case, right, like all of the hustle core business gurus, they don't have kids. Like,
no.
Tim Ferriss is like, I wake up and I meditate for 2 hours. And I'm like, cool, you very obviously don't have children, right? You're like,
right.
Alex Hormozy's like, hey, you have 109 days every year. That's the weekend. And I'm like, cool. So you're not running around on the weekends, like trying to entertain small children, right? Like even Marie Kondo and her like Katamari method, right? She said that she abandoned. She
gave it up.
After having
kids. She gave it up.
Like,
yep, totally.
So like finding the right vertical or the right niche and like talking directly to those people is always going to be good. And a really good example of that is ConvertKit. Like one of the things that Nathan Barry did when ConvertKit first launched was he went to popular influencers in specific niches or niches, whatever, and got them to use ConvertKit and talk about using ConvertKit. And then other people in that niche started using it, right? And so like once he conquered like, gym fitness influencers, he moved on to musicians and then moved on to like authors or whatever, right? And
even
I think
SPI and stuff like that too.
Yeah, exactly, right? And so like there's an opportunity there, I think, for you to really, do these little series, right? And you don't have to do it all at once, right? You don't have to say like, all right, for the next 6 months, maybe this is good. Like maybe you want to do this, right? But you don't necessarily have to say like, okay, for the next 6 months, I'm only going to talk to gym owners.
Right.
But you could say, for the next 6 months, I'm going to put out at least one episode every month that talks directly to gym owners. Because then you can make playlists and have the sirenaffiliates.com/gyms page and have all and then curate. Which is, something I still need to do better. Is like have those specific audience pages, but that could be a really strong play on like finding the right niches, reusing those scripts more or less, right? So like you write one script and then you can get 5 or 6 pieces of content out of it, and then talking directly to an audience and like not feeling like you're running out of content.
Yeah, I also what I really like about that too is I feel like it would be a really good way to unblock myself. So like if I am on a dry spell, right, where, I've done all the SEO research and there isn't really any obvious content that's coming, you could almost treat this like roulette. You know what I mean? Let's spin the wheel and let's like spin the wheel on the vertical, spin the wheel on the subject. And okay, we're going to talk about royalty programs for gyms, or we're going to talk about, and just build an episode around that and just be done with it. I also like that because that also opens me up to being able to who I interview a little bit. Because I'm kind of already doing this with Chris at Lifter. So he's going to end up on my podcast for an interview to talk about, course platforms and that kind of stuff. So like, all of that caters to that audience really well. That's really good input. I guess what else, whenever it comes to idea generation, is there anything else that comes to mind for you that might be helpful here, or is that the bulk of it?
For sure. I have because I think about this all the time, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
with Obsidian, like you can use that open
just write it down
knowledge graph thing, right? I will say I don't use Obsidian. Like I don't find it's very fast input on my phone, at least.
I have an automation.
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah, I do a thing where I have a recording on my home screen. There's a button, and I just tap that button, and I speak, and it just records it, and it puts it in Obsidian. And then once it goes into a folder that's called Inbox, and then just like once a week. God, we could do an episode just talking about this, but
Yeah.
and it's just an inbox, and then once a week I just transcribe it. I haven't figured out a way to automatically transcribe audio yet, but
You have an iPhone?
yeah.
Check out Voice Express.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Or Whisper Memo, though that
Whisper
might be
Memo.
just like direct audio input. I like that because it's got a really good watch integration, and
Nice.
that's on my action button.
Like half the
So-
time I have an idea and I just want to be like, I just want to say it real quick, get it,
Yeah.
and just I can come back to it later.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and so I think that's one thing, right? Is like make idea. It's like half the reason that I also use Apple Notes. Like I was like a big Bear Notes fan, but like I don't know. It felt like there was slightly more friction with Bear Notes than there was with Apple Notes.
yeah, I get that.
And since I'm using Obsidian for almost everything now, like I get my Markdown fix from that.
Right, right.
So like yeah, so I usually just like bark things into my phone, and it'll go from like Whisper Memos. Whisper Memos can email, or it has a Zapier setup. But like I haven't found good Zapier integration. Well, I use Make mostly, but I haven't found good Zapier integration for Obsidian.
I know.
Which is like it's like the hard part of like any of these like
Open source
like,
platforms.
I don't want to set up a
Decentralized.
server.
Right, exactly. It's decentralized, so yeah, you don't have an API to hook into.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I could use like push cuts, right? But then you need a push cut server running somewhere.
Right.
Anywho, digression, right?
Yes.
So with Whisper Memo, I have it sent to an email, and then I have Make. It's like my Gmail address plus WM for Whisper Memo, and then somehow those make it to Obsidian, and I now forget how.
That's okay.
Magic happens, I guess.
Right, right.
So you know, Drafts is another kind of good way. That's a really good app for like really fast input. But so when you're out and you can quickly capture things, is the gist of what I'm saying here, right? Like, and then the other thing I'm going to name drop Don Hahn here. He was the producer for many successful Disney animated films in the 90s, including The Lion King. I met him at a Disney event, and the question I asked him was around this. I'm like, how do you find... I said, I feel like all of my websites look the same. How do you find inspiration to kind of do things differently and think out of the box? And he told me, read books I wouldn't read, like watch movies I wouldn't watch, and buy a bunch of coffee table books of subjects I don't know a lot about. And man, that was weird. Like, I mean, I guess not weirdly helpful because he's made successful Disney movies, but like that helped me in a way I didn't expect it to. And like, especially like I just read, I read half of the Da Vinci biography by Walter Isaacson. I've never completed a Walter Isaacson book. He's an amazing writer. And he definitely doesn't write for me. But like I took so many notes throughout that book of like, oh, Da Vinci did this. Here's how it can apply to podcasting. And so, I would do that. Right. So I don't know if you have like a genre of book that you like to read. I would, look for not the opposite of that, but something like a few genres removed from that, just to like get, because we can kind of all get in our silo, right? Like I'm in a mastermind group with podcasters, and it's amazing, and like they're all in different stages of their business, and so they give me really good perspective. I'm also in a mastermind group of nobody else in that group has a podcast, but they do other things,
right?
And so like seeing how they do things and how I might be able to look through look at podcasting through their lens is super helpful.
Okay, that's really good to know. Yeah, I'm gonna chew on that. I've got books all over the place. I should open them up more.
Yeah, just like page through it or whatever, or like Blinkist is probably a good service, right?
Yeah,
but that's like also business books, so like maybe not.
Right.
Like fiction, historical fiction, or history have been the ones that have done well for me, because like they're not tethered to like these specific modern principles that we're probably seeing all the time, right? Like
right.
every business book in the last 10 years is going to mention the checklist manifesto, right? Like,
right.
so,
right. No kidding.
Like, no, I
Launch
get it.
by Jeff Walker,
no, it's a book,
you know?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, my wife had never heard of that book. She heard about his other book because he's a doctor and she's a nurse. So like, it's getting out of our bubble a little bit. I would caution you here though, that it could feel like you're always working or always thinking about like something. I wrote it down. I didn't bring my laptop on vacation last week. But I brought a journal with me, and like something I wrote down was like my son was like trying to stop the waves at the beach. And I'm like, podcasting kind of feels that way. Like it's a futile thing. You're not going to stop the waves.
Right.
So you should ride the wave, right? Like, so like pick a wave and ride it into shore. And I'm like, there's probably something here, but like, I don't want to do one of those LinkedIn posts that was like, I was at the beach last week with my son. Here's what I learned.
right.
Like, I hate that.
Right. Yeah. Right.
So like, I want to do it more tactfully than that. But you do like, how can I turn this bespoke experience with my children into engagement bait on LinkedIn?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's funny.
So.
Yeah. I think I need to. I do get the feeling that, speaking of LinkedIn, I do get the feeling that it's a platform that I haven't leveraged to its full capacity yet. In spite of the problems and its infamy, particularly in the Twitter circles, I get the distinct impression that there's a lot of people in that audience that I probably could talk. There's a lot of pretty good I've actually seen a fairly good amount of engagement on there, even if like half of it is very clearly just AI bots just commenting and crap like that. But
oh my gosh, I know. Anybody who comments with what is basically an AI summary of what I said gets blocked immediately.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. No kidding. Cool. Okay, so those are kind of the biggest challenges. I guess the only other thing that has been on my mind a little bit is I'm just starting to brush into. Actually, I have a podcast interview scheduled for my first one. I think it's like tomorrow. Yeah, it's tomorrow. I literally have an hour-long episode tomorrow, and I have no idea what to. I've never hosted. I've never been a host of an interview. Maybe I should have led with this one.
No. This is good, right?
So like the episode is I've got an hour blocked out. How do I know? I'm imagining that a good host would basically come in. I would have some questions pre-written, pre-prepared. I've already had some conversations with them, a little bit about just to kind of get my head wrapped around what we're going to talk about. But what do I as a host need to do to be able to ensure that I'm prepared for this interview, to make sure that it does fill out an hour and I'm able to get the most out of my time with this person, so that they're able to actually, articulate questions and get a lot of value for my audience? Yeah,
this is a really good question, right? Because I think you don't want it to just be a casual conversation, because it will go off the rails. Like anytime someone's like, oh, it's just a casual conversation, I'm like, cool. You probably don't have a lot of downloads, right? Like,
right. I want it to be pointed and provide value.
What I like to do. So first of all, I am very, not specific, but I have purposeful in who I have come on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I always pitch an idea to them that I think would resonate with my audience that they could speak to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't feel that, then we have a conversation and we see what we can talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I like to do my interviews in a 3-act story.
Okay.
And so act 1, and we can say like each act has like 2 or 3 questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each act, I'm sorry. So act 1 is the setup, right? And this is classic storytelling. It's the setup, it's the conflict, it's the resolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the setup is, why should I care about this problem, essentially,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I wouldn't ask, tell us who you are and what you do, especially if you do like a pre-recorded intro later where you say that stuff.
Right.
But you can start with, if I were having you on the show, so Alex, what is an affiliate program, right? Like that might be the first question I ask you, right? Because I want to level set and I want to get definitions clear for everybody before we move on, right? The conflict is, this is in journalism, this is called the inoculation effect. You anticipate what problems your audience is going to find with what your guest is saying, or what you're writing about in the article, and you address those before they can ask them, right? And so it's always kind of like a pseudo-inflammatory question, right? And it might be for you, why should I even have an affiliate program if I don't want to give people 30% of what I'm making, right? Like,
right.
So, and then you would come back and say, well, 30% of 100 is better than 30% of 0, right?
Right.
So,
right. Exactly.
So then we let the guest address the problem at hand. And then for me, Act 3 is the satisfying conclusion, right? So let's think Breaking Bad and not Dexter, or not Game of Thrones, or maybe Game of Thrones the books, not Game of Thrones.
Right.
Too soon to say on that.
Not Lost.
Yeah, right. We always end with actionable advice, right? And so okay, you've convinced me that affiliate programs are a good thing for a business, for a solopreneur to run. How do I get started? Right. Because then we are, and again, in journalism, this is why they always end with a happy story on a news program, right? Because they want to leave with people happy, not sad. Right.
They don't want people to associate watching their show with not feeling good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we say hey, it's really easy to get started. You would, figure out we talked about what the reward levels could be, and you could use Siren affiliates, or you can use something else, right? But if you want to learn more, and that's the general structure that I have with my interviews. I think the really important things, to keep in mind are you are having your guest on for a reason, right? And so you really want to stick to that. And so if you do get off course, don't be afraid to interrupt your guest. And if you feel like that's rude, I sometimes I feel like it's rude. Mark it down later for edit, right? I interviewed Mike Schmitz on my podcast talking about Obsidian. And we had a really great conversation about fountain pens, and it was 12 minutes long, and that got cut because it had nothing to do with personal knowledge management. Right. Writ large, right? I use a fountain pen to write my personal, but that's not what people tuned in for.
Right. Fun content for a short maybe, but definitely not for the actual podcast.
Yeah. And members got that. I didn't edit it out for members, but for the people who haven't, who for whom I haven't endeared myself to yet, they want to stay focused, right? They don't, they're like, wait, we're talking about Obsidian. I don't care about pens and paper.
Right.
So, I think that there's going to be some editing. There's going to be more editing certainly than your solo show.
Yeah, and that's okay. Descript makes it. I love that program. It's so good.
Yep. What I do as well is I will write down timestamp -edit to make my life a little bit easier.
Just so you know.
Yeah, or if it is a big edit, I will clap my hands to make a long skinny line on the waveform. Yeah.
Just like a marker.
Yeah, right. It's that's what those clappers are for in movies.
Yeah, they make the noise.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So, did I answer your question there? Was
yeah,
that helpful?
I think so. So yeah, and I have a couple follow-ups because I think this is really good. So, on the subject of time, so my podcast, like I said, is typically 10 to 15 minutes long. I don't want to set a hard and fast time, because like you've told me before, that was like the first piece of advice you gave me when we talked on Twitter. You were like, dude, don't even worry about minutes. Just do the content. When the content's done, the episode's done. Don't make it more than that. What do you think? So my episodes have naturally kind of, like I said, shown up in that 15 to 20 minute range. Do you think that intermixing an hour long, something as long as an hour long interview with that is too big of a format shift for this podcast, or do you think it matters?
I think like do it now, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Yeah.
Your audience might be very receptive to that. I would challenge that it has to be an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I think like I really feel like a half hour is a sweet spot for an interview.
Okay.
Which is like very like kind of sitcom, right? Sitcom length. Each act can be about 10 minutes.
Right. If they can have a dozen characters in South Park in 20 minutes, I can certainly do an interview in 20.
Right. And then like that, but having that limit, even if you go over it a little bit, also helps you keep it tight, right? Like yesterday, I had an interview. I usually have I block off 90 minutes because I like to do a pre-interview before, and then I have like the membership stuff after. We had 45 minutes max. Like my guest had to leave at a specific time. Let me tell you, like having a set time limit helped us keep that interview tight.
Yeah.
Because like I didn't ask like random follow-up questions that I had.
Right.
That I didn't think would be helpful.
Right.
And that's like that's kind of the calculus you're doing in your head, right? Is this going to be useful to the story? It's hard, right? Because you're like producing the show and kind of editing it in the moment.
Right. That makes sense.
And like, so I would say, and like, yes, you can record an hour and pare it down to, like what I've been doing now is if we get to like 45 minutes, I try to get it down to 35. And so like that is extra work for me because I don't really know how long it's going to be. I have a general idea, but like my editor does editing and then it comes back to me and I'm like, oh, what do I need to cut? I'll just cut that. Right.
What's got, yeah.
So, I think like if you think this should be 30 minutes, you kind of have that internal clock. And then if your guest is verbose, which I've had that before, I would just kind of say like, hey, I'm going to, I love the point you're making. I'm going to stop you right here though. I do want to ask you about this other thing. Cause like, so I think something that Joe Rogan, for all my druthers with him, does very well, is he'll kind of move through, like I assume that he doesn't do a whole lot of research on his guests. It's just like conversations, but he'll move through a bunch of topics quickly until he finds one that he likes. Yeah. And then they'll spend a bunch of time talking about that. Yeah. Right. So part of your job here is figuring that part out before the interview starts.
Gotcha. So that's the preparation that I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Okay. And so like, what I'll do is I'll look through like what they're blogging about, what they're talking about on LinkedIn right now. And if they do a lot of podcast interviews, I will check out the last one or two just to see what they talked about there. Because I don't want to just repeat an interview that they did. Right. Totally. And like the 3-act story helps a little bit with that, right? Because usually it's like, so who are you and what do you do? Cool. So like,
right. I'm trying to avoid that exactly because I've been on a lot of podcasts and I'm seeing a lot of patterns, and I like the 3 acts. I actually think I could extrapolate that into a lot of my content in general.
Yeah, it's really good. It's like really important. It's storytelling is super important. Yeah. And I've had very positive experiences with that. Because then it's not just a list of questions. It's like, we're taking the listener from zero to win.
Yeah, totally.
So,
totally.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we are at time. I know we started a little bit late. Do you have like any closing or parting shots for me?
I don't think so. I think that, that was really helpful. That helped kind of, I've already kind of been, a lot of this has been floating around in my brain, but it was good to just talk to somebody who knows this stuff to get some feedback. So I don't think I have anything else. No.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. For anybody who is listening or watching the live stream, hit us with the URL. Where can people find your podcast?
Oh, yeah. You can find me at partnership.fm.
Awesome. Love that.
Yeah, I was super excited that I got that domain, by the way.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I feel like FM domains are expensive, but they are ripe. Because like I got streamlined.fm and I was like, dang, how did that happen?
Yeah. I literally named the podcast that because it was available. I was like, yep, that's
got to be it, right?
It's got to be it. It's partnership.fm. That's mine.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, so head over to partnership.fm. Alex, thanks so much for scheduling this coaching call.
Yeah.
And definitely keep me posted on how things are going. I definitely want to follow up.
Yeah, I will do that. Thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Super helpful.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.